Okay, so if you open up the program we were working on before and we run it, you'll notice it looks just the same as we left it. And you add a name, an age, and a weight, and you click add, and it sorts it in the appropriate column. And every column has the appropriate heading. And today we're just going to combine this concept with folder items and learn how to save what we enter in here into a folder item. So for instance, if I have all of these list items and I want to save them, I'll click my save button. So let's explore how the save button is made. So of course I have a regular push button which I named save. I positioned right here. Just make it a little bigger. Now let's go to the action event of that save button. Now let's take a look at my code. So I have dimf as folder item. We know that is just standard creating a folder item type variable. And of course then we have the command f is equal to get folder item, and then we specify the path and the path type. If you remember, the path type we should set as default to 1, and the path itself is, in this case, could be anything, but in this case it's to my desktop. And I'm going to save this in a file called myrecord.txt. Following this, I create a text output stream so that I can actually write this text file. And then I begin with an if-then statement, which is right here. And basically this if-then statement tests whether the file myrecord.txt actually exists. So I say if f.exists equals false, or in other words, if the file does not exist, so this is the first time we're running the program, still haven't clicked the save button, this file doesn't exist, then I type t is equal to text output stream.create, and the parameter for create is of course specifying what folder item we're creating. In this case we're creating myrecord.txt. Let's ignore this section for a while and move on to else. Else basically means that if that condition isn't true, do this. And in this case, my text output stream, or t, will be equal to text output stream.append, and then the parameter for append is f. Append basically means add to, and I went over this in another tutorial. So basically, if the file already exists, then simply add to this file called f. And so now let's take a look at this save listbox command. Now this is kind of deceiving because the save listbox command isn't an actual command in Real Basic. All it is a method. And so what you do is you click here, add method, and that will take you to a screen that looks like this, and you can name your method anything you want. I named my method save listbox because that makes sense, but you can call it my method or anything like that. And so if you see over here is my save listbox method. The first thing you'll notice is that there's parameters. Parameters are basically variables that are passed from the code from which the method is called to the method itself. In other words, when we go back to our save action event, you'll see that we're dealing with certain variables. We're dealing with f as a folder item, and we've defined what f is, and we're dealing with t as a text output stream, and we've defined what t is. And so when we call our method, we want those variables to exist in the method as well. And we can do that using method parameters. And so when we go back to save listbox, then you see that I've specified my parameters. I have OS as a text output stream and LB as listbox. And basically all this means is that when that method is called, you will need to specify first one text output stream and one listbox. And so here I specify my text output stream as t, and my listbox is list1. The confusing thing, of course, is why are they called OS and LB? Well, because those names will be the working names I use for those variables in the method. In other words, I will be referring to my text output stream, which in the action event code is called t, in my save listbox method is OS, and I'll be referring to my listbox, which of course is called list1, I'll be referring to it as LB in my method. I'll explain why we would do this in a bit. So once we have these done, we've specified what our parameters actually are here. So we've specified that t will be our text output stream and list1 will be our listbox. We can begin to write the code for our method. And basically all we're going to do is we're going to define n as an integer and s as a string. And then we're going to go ahead and use a for next loop. Now, we still haven't really looked at for next loops extensively, but I've mentioned them to you. So just try to bear with me here. Basically, a for next loop executes a line of code as many times as you specify within a range. So for instance, if we do, I'll show you an example over here. I can type for n is equal to 0 to 5, and I close the loop with next. And basically, that'll execute whatever code is in between here from 0 to 5, or in other words, 6 times, which is sort of what we want to do here. And the reason we're using a for next loop is we want to make sure that every single row in the list box is recorded. And so what we do is we go for n is equal to 0, because we want to begin with row number 0, 0 based of course, and we want to continue to do it up to the amount of rows that exist in the list box. Now remember, we were referring to our list box as LB, and so because we don't know a specific number, there might be any number of rows in the list box, we use a property of the list box called list count to tell us how many rows there are in that list box. And so we go for n is equal to lb.listCount. Now the reason the -1 is here is because rows in a list box are of course 0 based, while list count, strangely enough, is 1 based. And therefore, if list count tells you that there are 5 rows, those rows are actually numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, strangely enough. And therefore the -1 is necessary. And then we go ahead and we define our string. And basically what we want our string to look like is we want it to essentially show the name followed by a comma, followed by the age, followed by a comma, followed by a weight. And so how we accomplish that, of course, is we use the cell command. So we go s is equal to lb.cell, and we specify what row. Well, we'll be alternating through the rows, so I put row number n, and so it'll begin with row 0, then I'll go to row 1, then row 2, as we go through the loop. Then I go plus a comma, plus lb.cell, and notice I'm switching here the column count because I want to move through the columns to record everything. Then I type the command os, which is my text output stream, or t, as in the action event, and I write line s, which is my string. And then of course, once I'm finished, I close the text output stream with os.close. And we run our code and let's see what happens. So first of all, let's add some values. And let's click save. So now that we've saved, we've presumably created a file called myrecord.txt on the desktop, and it's right there. And presumably the records that we see here are now recorded in the text file. So let's open the text file, and we see that in fact, yes, Bob, age 12, weight 125, and Fred, age 10, weight 80, is in fact recorded. That's the basics of recording data in Real Basic. Of course, we have to learn how to read the data back. Keep in mind that there's no real significance to why we used commas. You could use spaces, you could use virtually any character to delineate the difference between data values. You could use tabs and so on. You probably don't want to use characters just in case those characters appear in your data. But if you understood this tutorial, or at least gained something from it, then you're already well on your way.